Okay, so the very first thing is we got to talk formatting real quick, just to make sure everything looks the way that it should. So an easy way to fix that, and I know I've done this a lot, but I wanted to review it again. You click in here and you hit Control A and make sure everything is Times New Roman, 12-point font, and now's a good time for you to double space it. So things you want to look out for, making sure you don't have like a funky space in between, things like this. We want to get rid of those spaces. You also want to make sure that you don't have spaces in between your paragraphs as well. Another place to double check is here down at the end with your works cited. If you feel like you're done with your essay, kick this guy down to here. And it should look like this. There should be no extra space happening in between like that. So that's just going to be some back spacing on your end. And you can double check this once you feel like you're done with your essay. One thing I'd like you guys to do, well, obviously you want to make sure that your name is up here. My name, Advanced American Literature, the date. And then make sure you give your essay a title. I wanted to review this because some of you are trying to type this in and it's creating a lot of funkiness. So we're going to go over how to insert a page number. So you go to Insert, Page Number, pick the first one in the corner, and then type in your last name. Now you'll notice it's different font, so you're going to have to highlight that, change it to 12-point Times New Roman. The other thing I would like you guys to do is please make sure that your thesis is highlighted. And I would also like you to go through, and it doesn't matter what color, but also like you to go through and highlight all of the quotes with the entire sentence. So not just the quote itself, but the whole sentence that you, I think I got too much there, that you have used. So if you could take a few minutes and do that, that would be great. So now we're going to start following along with the paper I gave you, the kind of checklist as you go, just things to think about, issues I've noticed looking in some of your essays. If you are a remote person, I will be posting this information so you can follow along with this. Just check the stream. So in your introduction, a couple things I want you to make sure of. The first thing is that you have a great first sentence that really captures the essence of your essay. It should all kind of tie together and not be this random thought that doesn't necessarily flow with the rest of your ideas. So pay really close attention to that first sentence and really try to make it a stellar, I'm gonna really draw people in kind of a sentence. The other thing I wanted you to double check is to make sure you're doing this right. I'm seeing so many funky things, people putting this in quotation marks and italicizing it. At some point in your essay, in the intro, you need to say, in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, or introduce the author and the title. After that, you will only refer to Fitzgerald by his last name. You will never mention his first name again. So be cognizant of that as you make your way through the text. With that sentence, I would pair up a summary. Describe the story in your own words. Be careful that you're not plagiarizing. This is also a friendly reminder. I have a plagiarism protection on this document. So I click that button and it highlights everything you copied from the internet. So don't fall into that trap and make your adjustments accordingly. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that sometimes there can be a disconnect between your summary and your thesis. So let's say my thesis is about Myrtle, but my summary just says, in the story, The Great Gatsby, readers follow the tale of Gatsby and his pursuit of the dream life. And then I go straight into my thesis and say, ultimately, Myrtle, blah, 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 blah. But I have not told my readers at all who Myrtle is. So you need to make sure that you introduce at some point your topic. Let us know who Myrtle is. Let us know what East Egg, West Egg. And it doesn't have to be a huge description. It can be as simple as the character Myrtle is introduced as the woman having an affair with Tom Buchanan, the husband of Daisy Buchanan. Something that simple, a sentence to at least let us know where you're coming from. So those are things to double check in your intro. If the outline's throwing you off a little bit, I would follow this instead, making sure that your thesis doesn't come out of nowhere, introducing people or topics or ideas that you haven't talked about yet. So take a minute and just read through your intro to make sure you have conquered all of these bullet points here. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is your conclusion. Obviously, you want to try to avoid repeating yourself. Remember, the goal of your conclusion is about 3-4 sentences. It doesn't have to be a super, super long paragraph because that's when we run into repetition. Things to think about if you're struggling a little bit. Now, you might feel really confident in how you ended your conclusion. That's great. That's awesome. But conclusions are tough. And if you're not feeling confident, these are maybe some questions you can ask yourself. I'm not saying you have to do all of them. I'm not saying you have to do any of them. I just feel like if you're struggling a little bit, these might be the questions to run through. The biggest thing is leave a lasting impression with your last sentence. Look at your last sentence. How does it resonate with your readers? What do you want to leave them thinking about? So those last 2 bullet points there are something to really consider, whether or not you decided to go with those prompts there or what was in the original outline. Just kind of think to yourself, okay, here's my thesis. Here are the things I talked about. What's that lasting message or impression I want to leave at the end? And do all of those ideas connect? So take a minute, read through your conclusion, and see if there's any of these elements up here in these bullet points that would maybe help make that ending a little bit stronger or tie all of your ideas together. All right, so now I want to go over just some issues I've been noticing in CQCs, which kind of tell me they might transition into your essay. So my biggest complaint with a lot of your quotes is that you're not giving enough context. And what I mean by that is you need to tell us what's going on in the story. So look at what you highlighted. You should have gone through and highlighted your quotes. Go through, look at what you highlighted, and make sure yours does not look like the bottom one. I do not want simple Daisy says, I'm glad it's a girl, and just introduce the quote that way. This is no good. We have to give more context and make this junior level style writing. It's an easy fix. Sometimes you guys too just go right into the idea without letting us know, where is this conversation happening? Who is it happening between? What just happened in the story? Why are they talking to each other? Those are questions you can answer right before your quotes. Some of you are just going into your ideas and then chucking in a quote, but you have to give us context, and it can happen in one sentence. You just have to tell us what's going on in the story. So I can give all of my background information before that quoted sentence in yellow, but I have to let my readers know, where did this happen in the course of the story? So here's what I'm looking for. Daisy makes it clear her expectations for her daughter when she's talking to Nick after dinner. What I've done there is I've let my readers know, here's when this happened in the book. So go through your quotes and make sure you don't have this bottom one, that you have some kind of context that lets us know when, where, how, why did this quote happen in the story. All right, so the next thing I want you to double check, and this is not on your checklist, but this is posted in the stream, and this is just basic review. Some of you are not quoting your quotes correctly, you're not embedding them correctly. So remember, you have an option of a complete sentence and a colon, then introduce your quote. You have the that rule where you go right into the quote and without a comma, and typically you would put brackets around this, but because this is a I word or a proper noun, I'm not putting brackets, but typically you would put brackets unless it's a proper noun or it starts with I. The other thing is the speech tag. So also take a second and just look through your quotes and make sure that you guys have done those correctly at some point. The other thing I wanted to review and keep up there too, double check if you are quoting dialogue. If you're quoting a quote, remember the double quotation marks are in dark blue. They go around the entire quotation. So this right here all came from the book, in theory. I made this top part up, but it's fine. So the blue are the double quotation marks, and then you put single quotation marks around the dialogue. So those are things to double check, all of which are on your checklist. The other thing I want you to check with your quotes is your citations. We are screwing these up. I'm seeing funky things in there like page. I'm seeing things in there like chapter. There should be two things in your citations. Either the author's name, but if you already mentioned the author's name, you can leave that out, and just the page number. So take a moment and look at those three things to make sure you are not doing anything extra in those in-text citations. Another thing I have been noticing, actually in your essay, you guys are saying things like on page 15 in chapter 3, no, we don't do that. That all happens in your in-text citation. That is not a way to introduce a quote. So you need to check your essay and make sure you aren't typing in your sentences. On page 15 in chapter 3, it's irrelevant, and we have a much better way of doing that without having to say phrases like that. So double check those things and make sure you did not use that. Other ideas to just think about. You need to make sure that you connect all of your ideas back to your thesis, and that was part of your outline. But when you're going through your body paragraphs, you need to make sure there are two elements to it at the end, that you remind us how all of those points in that body paragraph connected back to the thesis, and then you have a transition sentence. I did a video on the transition sentence, so if you need to rewatch that, watch it. But it should remind us what you talked about in that paragraph, and then vaguely introduce the ideas that are going to be in the next paragraph. So those are things to make sure as you're working your way through that checklist that you took care of. Other tips and tricks. Here, now that we're at the end of your essay and we're just checking things, read your essay out loud to yourself at some point. Mumble it to yourself and double check to make sure that it sounds okay and it flows. A lot of times that's when you can catch mistakes or missing commas. Do that Control F where the search engine pops up and look for and look for comma. Type those in separately, but it's going to highlight all of your ands. It's going to highlight all of your commas. That's where you guys can check to see if you used commas in the right place. Reminding you that when you have and in a sentence, if there's not a complete sentence on both sides, is rich is not a complete sentence, you do not need a comma. The bottom here is an example of a comma and then having a complete sentence to follow. So this little activity here, which is on your checklist, you can do on your own, will just help you go through and see if you can catch any of those missing commas or unnecessary commas. Then the last thing, I do not want these words in there. So use have got to go. Replace it with readers. Get rid of all the use. You can do Control F search for that. No I's, no me's, no my's, or I believe. We know this is what you believe because you wrote the paper. So in another Control F search, you can type in these individual words. Obviously, if it's in a direct quote, you're not going to take it out. But if it's in a sentence, you guys need to get rid of that and replace it. You don't need that in there. You also want to avoid the phrase, in this quote. I just don't like that phrase. I think it's redundant. I don't think that it adds anything to your paper. So you could say something like, here, comma, Nick is blah, 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 blah. We know it's a quote. You put quotation marks around it. So let's try to avoid that redundancy. That's another word you could type in. You can type in quote, and it will highlight where you used it and get rid of it. Make that sentence stronger. Those resonate as like weak 8th grade style sentences to me. So avoid those if you are stuck and you're not sure how to rephrase this stuff, or if you're not sure that you used a comma correctly, just take some time and ask me. Let me know.